Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the monthly roundtable discussion of the Council for Strategic Affairs. Today is Saturday, January 10th, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We planned this roundtable discussion more than a month ago, and events have happened since then. So those of you who registered using our flyer see certain number of panelists, but we are going to have some changes because some people dropped out at the last moment. So we have change in panel. The topic of today's discussion is US-Venezuela conflict and the Southern Caribbean Energy Corridor. So right now we have for the panelists, Dr. Indira Rampersad, Ambassador Gustavo Westmann, Mr. Mike Singh, and Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor. These four would be our panelists for today. I won't talk much about council except for saying that we are registered as a 501c3 organization in the United States. And we do monthly roundtable discussion and we do a monthly lecture, distinguished lecture for our audience. This gives you a map of Venezuela, and you can see adjoining Colombia and Guyana. And this next map tells you the geographical location of Venezuela and United States, which are in actually different continents. One is in North American continent, the other one is in South American continent. So I'm not going to give my viewpoints. I will rely more on our distinguished panelists, four of them. Each of them will speak for 5 to 7 minutes, and then the remaining time will be for discussion. Some housekeeping rules: please stay on mute all the time. Keep your cell phone on vibration mode. Please don't interrupt our panelists. All the questions are moderated through the chat room, so send your questions through the chat room. Questions have to be precise. They should not be lengthy comments, just questions. This program is being recorded. It is also being live streamed on our YouTube channel. It will be available later on our YouTube channel as well as on our website as an educational resource. We request our US-based audience to support us, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and donate to Council for Strategic Affairs. And without further ado, I will start this roundtable on, and I will start with Mr. Mike Singh, who is joining us from New Delhi currently. He is from Guyana, but he's also based in United States and is, an entrepreneur, an all-round personality, monitor for elections in Guyana. So, Mike, the floor is yours. Please keep 5 to 7 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you, Dr. Adityanjee, Your Excellencies, Ambassador Kapoor, Ambassador Gustavo, and to Dr. Rampersad. Greetings to you. Good evening to you both from the scenic and historic capital of Delhi, India, where I am, having just led a Latin American trade delegation to the India, food festival. 1 week of like nonstop interacting with people. When you say to them, you are from a country next to Venezuela, they stop mid-track what they're going to say, what they're going to do, and they look at you and they start asking questions, about Venezuela. Were you affected? Is your country going to be okay? We know Prime Minister Modi has visited Guyana. He has visited Trinidad and Tobago. And we are aware that India has now turned to Guyana as a supplier of oil, unrefined crude oil, to be shipped to India, so India does not become totally reliant upon Russia. Having said this, Ambassador and others, I can tell you firsthand, last Sunday, I was scheduled to have left Guyana 1 a.m., in the morning, to fly to New York to get my flight to Delhi. Regrettably, the flight was delayed from 1 a.m. until 5:24 p.m., thus getting me from Georgetown to New York City at 11 something at night. I could not make my connection to Delhi, so I was then forced to spend the night in New York and then get on the next day's flight, arriving 1 day late into Delhi, because the airspace around Guyana, Trinidad, the entire Caribbean basin was closed. The whole airspace was taken over by the FAA, and so no flight. I'm pretty sure the same happened in Trinidad and Tobago and elsewhere. So de facto, the United States today has complete and total control of the entire Caribbean basin airspace. And this is just to show you that America did not spare any effort in unleashing an armada I have not seen in my lifetime, maybe since the Falklands War between Britain and Argentina. Guyana is sitting right next to Venezuela, and I'm absolutely confident that there could and there will be unintended consequences if Venezuela descends into a state of civil war, which is quite possible if things don't change quick enough, much like Iraq, maybe much like Libya, and that will force thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of Venezuelan refugees to spill into Guyana. That is just a quick scenario for you. I yield the floor back to you.
Thank you, Mike, for very succinct and brief comments. I appreciate the brevity because we would like to spend more time on questions and answers. I would next like to invite Dr. Indira Rampersad. She's a lecturer in political science and international relations at University of West Indies at St. Augustine. Dr. Indira Rampersad, please, the floor is yours. And if you can turn your camera on because we don't see you, and kindly unmute yourself, ma'am.
Okay, can you see me now?
Yes, we can see you and we can hear you now.
Okay, so I did a brief presentation to keep it brief.
Okay.
And I'll just go through it quickly.
Sure.
On January 3rd, 2026, the world looked on in shock as the United States executed a tactical military operation and surgically extracted Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro. Maduro and his wife Celia Flores were taken to the United States to be charged on drug trafficking, narco-terrorism, conspiracy, cocaine importation conspiracy, and weapons offenses. But the Maduros have pleaded not guilty to these charges. Meanwhile, the United States installed an interim government headed by Maduro's Vice President, Delcy Rodriguez, who surprisingly has agreed to cooperate with the U.S. on its agenda to control Venezuela's oil, which it plans to divert away from China and into the United States. Some argue that the U.S. is taking a calculated risk in having Rodriguez at the helm, given that other hardliners are still in her government, including Defense Minister Padrino and Interior Minister Cabello. Numerous issues have emerged on this ongoing saga on the global and hemispheric geopolitical role of the United States. And this presentation seeks to analyze some of the key issues emerging out of the situation. First, it notes that the U.S. stated territorial claims of the Western Hemisphere as its sphere of interest, excluding all others through the 1823 Monroe Doctrine and the 1904 Roosevelt Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. This naturally brings to the fore the geopolitical dimension of the issue, particularly the roles of China, Russia, and Iran, the fortification of U.S. hegemony in the region and in the global arena, on the other hand. Second, it raises the question of whether this is a return to ideological Cold War politics, reminiscent of the East-West conflict of the Cold War. I refer here to capitalism versus socialism, right-wing Trumpism versus left-wing Madurism or Chavismo. Here we want to examine the salience of the individual level of analysis of the Cuban-American Marco Rubio, now U.S. Secretary of State, who has confronted Cuban communism and its leaders for decades as an American Republican congressman. Thirdly, we need to examine the material economic dimension of the issue as it relates to Venezuela's bountiful oil reserves, valued over 300 billion barrels per day, which Trump has claimed as that of the US and blatantly admitted should be diverted away from China and poured into the United States to secure its own interests and allegedly that of the Venezuelan people. Fourth, we need to examine the legality and legitimacy of U.S. foreign policy to Venezuela and now other countries, including Greenland, Mexico, and Colombia, as it relates to the doctrine of sovereignty, and more importantly, the relevance of international law, specifically the United Nations Charter, the role of the UN Security Council, and the rule of law on the whole. Fifth, we need to postulate on the future of Venezuela and what lies ahead, whether it would indeed experience or undergo change and by extension, policy change, democratic transition, and elections, or would it be more of the same? And finally, we must explore the legitimate means of treating with dictators who violate fundamental human rights, ignore the rule of law, terrorize their populations, rig elections, torture political prisoners, leading to mass exodus of their citizens in the sums of millions. Who is supposed to deal with them when the populations are powerless in the face of strong military power and repression? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Rampersad, for a very balanced and all-encompassing opening statement on your part. You have touched on all the issues like a true academic without any special emphasis or bias to any particular point of view, and you are raising very relevant questions. I am very hopeful that during discussion we will come back to some of these issues. Now it's my honor and privilege to invite Ambassador Gustavo Westmann from Brazil. He was Brazilian ambassador to India at one point in time and has been working with the Brazilian presidency very, very closely in number of multilateral fora and as economic advisor. So Ambassador Gustavo, please come on the platform, please.
Thank you very, very much, Doctor. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's really a pleasure to see some of your faces again. We are becoming quite close in these dialogues, and I think such a great opportunity to exchange some of our opinions and perceptions in such a changing and complex world, right? Remember, Doctor, just these days, so we are on vacations in Brazil. Suddenly I received this call, Gustavo, we have an emergency. So we had a cabinet meeting at the president's office to discuss the invasion. Everybody was shocked. And that's the first thing I'd like to highlight. No one expected what happened. And I'm talking about intelligence, I'm talking about police, I'm talking about the army, in not only in Brazil, but most of the world. I would say even in the US, very few people knew about it, and everybody was shocked. So if from one hand, it was a brilliant military operation, from the other hand, that was one of the most irresponsible things we think in this century. So another thing that I worth highlighting, no one knows exactly what's going to happen. So we have a very passionate discussion these days. Brazil has a very long border with Venezuela, and we're preparing ourselves. Okay, what's going to happen? So we have an operation called Operation Acolhida. That's the operation that used to be receiving Venezuelans fleeing from Maduro's regime. But now, what's going to happen? Are these people going to go back to Venezuela? Are Maduro supporters going to start to flee the country to Brazil? We don't know. And it's a bit frustrating because we end up having conversations that look like we are at a friend's house just brainstorming, Instead, we're with ministers and government officials discussing what is going to happen. And we really don't know what kind of regime is going to be established in Venezuela? We don't know. How is the population of Venezuela react? Are they going to flee the country? Are they going to go back? Are they going to support the new regime? We don't know. So lots of question marks. The things we know are that was one of the greatest violations to international law we've seen in recent years. And in the past, at least, the US had some justifications. I don't know, they were fighting for democracy or they were fighting for something, this or that. Now, they don't even need this justification. It's clearly and openly stated by Trump that they are looking for oil in Venezuela and they are trying to block the access of this oil. Not only they wanted this oil to themselves, but also to avoid or to impede that this oil goes to China, to India, to Russia, and to other parts of the world. So it's a clear neo-colonial practice. We haven't seen that before in such a, let's say, explicit manner, especially in recent years. And we're trying to figure out things. I think that's the moment. But we feel very weak to react militarily. We're talking about the greatest military power in the world, and I don't think the second and third and fourth greatest military powers, such as China, India, Russia, we want to get involved in a conflict in the other side of the world. I'm pretty confident that will not happen. And just to conclude, someone called me these days, a very famous journalist in Brazil, to ask me about how BRICS is reacting to that. And then I called the Sherpa, the Brazilian Sherpa BRICS, and his answer was, Gustavo, nothing has happened yet. We're having our first conversations provoked by Russia. You see how curious it is. So another country in a very illicit war. And but his and our perception is that, for example, India is very unlikely to get involved in such a discussion within the BRICS context. So are we that powerless to react to this conflict? Are we going to just feel comfortable with the invasion, alleging that an authoritarian regime fell and that for those reasons everything is doable? I don't know. So I'm raising more questions than answers. I'll stop here and I'll let some more discussions to the questions. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you very much indeed, Ambassador Gustavo Westmann. You raised very pertinent issues about international relations, sovereignty, neo-colonialism, etc. And I'm hopeful that we will discuss some of these issues during the discussion section. Now, it's my honor and privilege to invite our last panelist who graciously agreed to come at the last moment, Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor. Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor is retired IFS officer from Government of India, currently based in Washington, D.C. And if I may add, he is a mentor and he is member of the International Advisory Board of the Council for Strategic Affairs. So Ambassador Kapoor, please take the floor. And he has served in actually South America in his diplomatic assignments.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Dr. Adityanjee, for holding this discussion. It is a very prescient sort of theme that you had assigned to this topic, and suddenly the developments took place, and you talked about US-Venezuela, and when US-Venezuela has been, the entire region has been plunged into a big crisis. The entire world has been plunged into a big crisis because of US-Venezuela, what has happened between these two countries in the last week or so. The global implications are also very serious in the sense that the basic charter of the United Nations, how much capacity it has to implement the basic charter has come under question. The future of the UN itself is under question, again, in a more serious manner, in the sense that if one country can do what it wants to do, and on a unilateral sort of basis, without any other countries, joining together or approval. Earlier, we had, coalition of the willing and some such facades, but this time there's no such thing. Also, the right to intervene by one country and another on these sort of pretexts is something which is a very important aspect. Then the regional dimensions, the regional aspects, the Monroe Doctrine, which has also been now turned over on its head and also called the Donroe Doctrine, Donald Trump Doctrine, Donroe. Then there are, of course, the domestic implications. I do not want to repeat what most of the other speakers, panelists have very eloquently expressed before me, but the domestic implications in Venezuela are also very important, which has been touched upon in some detail by the earlier panelists. So I won't go down there. But in the US also, it is very important, which has not been discussed so far in terms of the powers of the president, the powers of the Congress, in terms of war, in terms of declaration of war, in terms of carrying out, executing any such actions against other countries. Then the sovereignty of countries, where the president, who's in the position of president of a sovereign country, and he is picked up on the basis of allegations which have been leveled against him in the US, and he is now being tried in US courts under US law by US judges. So how many different levels of infringement of international law is that? That can be also questioned. The November elections are also due in a few months from now. The heat will pick up, the canvassing will start. Whether that is also related, the economic implications, some of them have already touched upon in terms of Venezuela's prowess as being the topmost resource in the world for energy, also for many other minerals and rare earths also. The rules-based order itself, which had been imposed for a long time on the world by the Western Hemisphere, that itself is under question. The Westphalian system of states and democracy and definition of all that is also being sort of put under question, whether states have any rights or not. What is a definition of a state any longer, whether it holds? The justifications which were put forward to the rule of law also, which the Western world so proudly proclaimed to the rest of the world, that itself seems to be absolutely thrown into the dustbins of history. Narco-terrorism, weapons, how much those charges are justified and whether they can be leveled in this manner against a sovereign country. We had seen what had happened in Iraq under the facade of the weapons of mass destruction, which have not been found till today, and the state to which the country has been reduced from a functioning entity to a totally chaotic country, which is not an asset to the world. The other aspects are, where do we go from here, which I just want to touch upon very briefly, which we can elaborate as we go along. What about the Western Hemisphere itself, if we focus? Greenland, the also mention about Canada being subsumed within America, Cuba, Mexico, Colombia, and other countries who are under watch in a way. Then if we go beyond the Western Hemisphere, what happens on the China-Taiwan issue now? Can you at all, as USA, intervene or take any action if China decides to carry out a similar action in Taiwan or some other means of taking over Taiwan? Similarly, the Russia-Venezuela relations are also very, very important. They have one of their tankers has been sort of taken over by the US in the high seas, international waters. So there are tremendous amounts of implications of that. Are we on the verge of Cold War 2.0, or as some people are saying, are we seeing the beginnings or the sort of seeds of the World War III being laid? I'm going to stop here, Dr. Adityanjee, and carry on further later.
Thank you very much indeed, Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor. You have raised very interesting and important, I won't say interesting, but very important issues that international relations experts need to discuss, because the implications are enormously significant. I'm going to start asking as moderator questions to each of our participants, and then we will entertain some questions from the audience members. My first question goes to Mr. Mike Singh, who is from Guyana. Mike, Maduro in the last 2 years had raised the heat on Essequibo province. Now, some people will say that coveting your neighbor's territory had a facilitating effect in his capture and kidnapping by the United States. If he had not actually raised the heat and not coveted Essequibo province as part of Venezuela and the mineral wealth and the oil wealth of that from Guyana, possibly Trump may not have been emboldened. The other viewpoint is that it has nothing to do with that. It is uniquely Trumpian action. What do you say, Mike, about that? Kindly unmute yourself. Mike, are you there? Kindly unmute yourself. Okay, I don't see Mike responding. So maybe any other panelist can answer that question, but you have to unmute yourself. Ambassador Kapoor, you are muted. Kindly unmute yourself.
I think I would rather have Ambassador Westmann address that if possible.
Ambassador Gustavo, if you can unmute yourself and give your response to this.
Yeah, well, that's a tough one, Doctor. And I think under the perspective of Guyana, there are so many singularities that are kind of difficult for me to position myself also because I'm still an acting diplomat. What I believe, that's just by seeing the declarations of President Trump recently, I believe that there is a great interest from the US in assuming a colonial or a dominant role in Latin America as it happened several years before. And that might now influence or interfere in the negotiations, business, and interests of other great powers within Latin America. What I can tell you, I saw recently a crazy map, but that kind of spread around in social media. The world divided into three. I don't know if you've all seen that, right? That would be the entire America to the US, kind of Europe, Central Asia, and all that part to Russia, and all the Asia and kind of going to Africa to China. That's the crazy thing I've seen recently. However, if, for example, tomorrow the US decides to interfere in the Indian businesses or Chinese businesses in Guyana and Colombia or in any other country in the region, what is going to happen? Is China going to move troops to that part of the world? Of course not. That's not their territory. No one is going to put their hands into that thing, right? So the thing is, we still have 3 years of Trump, but regardless of what he does, he's trying to move the world back to an order that no longer exists. That's not viable anymore. Yet we are leaving that. If it's going to last 4 years, 5, 10, 8, we have to do something now. What to do, I cannot tell you. I was a very diplomatic answer, Doctor. I didn't give you an answer to what you asked, but I decided just to somehow, bring some more new elements into the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Gustavo Westmann. My next question will go to Dr. Indira Rampersad. So, Dr. Indira, kindly unmute yourself, and if you want to put your camera on, that'll be fine. So, Dr. Rampersad, Ambassador Kapoor talked about, United States wanting to have Greenland, Canada, etc., etc. So after Second World War, the consensus was that nations will not be allowed to, usurp the territory of other nation states. That was the consensus between the former Soviet Union and the United States of America / NATO, that no country was allowed as part of the so-called rule-based order to grab the territory of another country. And that consensus had held so far, with some exceptions here and there. But now what you see, do you think it is recap of the history of United States of America that started with a federation of 13 colonies in 1776 and grabbed the entire North American territory by one means or the others to not only 50 states, but still a colony like Puerto Rico and an extra Western Hemisphere related island of Hawaii and certain island territories. So are you seeing naked imperialism and grabbing territory?
So yes, it certainly returns to territorial conquest, and that is undoubtable. And they're saying it. And the interesting thing about this conflict, this particular conflict, is that they're very, very open about their agenda. Their agenda to keep the Western Hemisphere to themselves, the oil agenda, the economic agenda, the political agenda in Venezuela. They're very, very blatant about it. Americans. It's not secret. The American leaders are very bold about it. But I also think subsequently it also relates to the Monroe Doctrine, the 1823 Monroe Doctrine of America being its sphere of, in the Western Hemisphere being its sphere of influence, and warding off all other foreign powers in the region. I also think it has to do with the Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine 1904, in which Roosevelt emphasized keeping away these foreign powers who wanted to collect debt owed to the United States, and Santo Domingo, for example, and was an attempt to keep them out. But I think bigger than this now, and it is now being stated, and the fact that they're going for Greenland and confronting Denmark and NATO allies, Colombia, other parts of the world, and you rightly said it has been happening in Panama with Noriega, in Iraq with Saddam Hussein, is a quest to be the ultimate global hegemon. This is about power. And this is not just about regional power in the Western Hemisphere. This is about global power, international power. As the hegemon, the superpower, the one and only. So they are prepared to crush any opposition towards this agenda. That is my position on this.
Thank you, Dr. Rampersad. My next question will go to Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor. Ambassador Kapoor, you mentioned that we might see possibly beginning of World War III. A more charitable explanation and that we are seeing emergence of a de facto G3, three-polar world led by United States, Russian Federation, and China with their individual spheres of influence. Do you think that scenario is plausible, or we are heading towards multipolarity?
Well, I think everything is up in the air, and to look at the crystal ball and try to sort of foresee what is going to happen or foretell the future may not be the right thing currently, because things are evolving at a very fast pace. Nobody could have imagined that something which had happened in Panama many decades back, where Manuel Noriega was picked up on similar charges, but that during that era, if we go back to that era, there was very little, our computers had just come into the world. There was no internet, there was no mobile telephones, there was no social media as such. So it was only radio and television, which was, and the print media, which would carry the news. So the reactions were muted in a way because there was no platform. Now everybody is a global actor, every individual, and he can tweet, he can create impact by what he says. So for this news to travel anywhere in the world takes a matter of split seconds, and the reaction and impact are of course multiplied that many times. So in 2026 for such a thing to have happened was something quite remarkable, and for it to happen so boldly, like the other panelists said just now, that they are doing it in a way where they are making clear what they are going to do and what they will be doing in the future also. So it's not that they are keeping anything in hiding. Otherwise, we would learn about a lot of these things through our diplomatic meetings with other countries, where we share intelligence with each other, or we'd get to know when the files were declassified 20 years, 25 years later, or through some memoirs or autobiographies of various people, either diplomats or intelligence agents. You'd get to know a lot of the inside stories. But now, for the administration in the US to be declaring it openly as to what they are doing and why they are doing it, that is something also which is a paradigm shift in terms of their declared goals of running that country, of taking over the oil, of sharing the spoils, which they will decide how they will share with Venezuela, between Venezuela and USA. And there is no check on that. There is no other country which has any role in that. There is no UN which has any role in that. There is no G2 or G3 which has any role in that. So whether it will lead to, like we were told that President Trump and President Xi Jinping have already discussed the G2 format earlier. And then after this crisis, the sudden maps started emerging of G3, for example, like Ambassador Gustavo also mentioned. So whether that is at all a serious proposition, or it leads to multipolarity, or it leads to a worse situation, not very far off, because if the rule of law has collapsed completely, then it becomes like not only, only the only rule currently in place is might is right. So if that is a state of things, currently, the future can be very, very difficult for the whole world. Where it will lead to, whether to a World War III or to other such actions by other countries or whatever, is up in the air.
Thank you, Ambassador Kapoor. I'll try to address next question to Mr. Mike Singh. Mike, can you unmute yourself, because you were not able to respond to our earlier question? If you can unmute yourself, we will.
Yes.
Okay. So you know that Maria Corina Machado is meeting President Trump next Tuesday or Wednesday. Since you are from the region and you have followed the Venezuelan politics very closely, what is your hunch whether Trump will continue with Rodriguez as the interim president, or there will be some role for Machado, who has come openly in terms of US-Venezuela alliance, opening up all the oil companies and oil exploration to US companies, etc., etc. What is your hunch on that?
Thank you. I feel that President Trump is going to act first and foremost in the interest of the US and the big oil. Big oil is supposed to be meeting with him sometime today or tomorrow. He's having meetings with the czars of the big Western oil companies. Will he continue with Rodriguez? That's anyone's guess, because we know all along he was supporting Maria Corina Machado, and until she got the Nobel Prize, and he didn't feel happy about that. He's kept insisting that President Trump, has ended 8 wars, and he should get the Nobel Prize. For Maria Corina Machado, she dedicated the Nobel Prize to Trump, and she even said publicly should be happy to share it with him. Now, the Nobel Prize is not a piece of cake. You're going to take a knife on a saucer and cut it down the middle. You know, it's more than just, you know, an award. It's symbolism, it's historic, and I've never heard of anyone sharing the prize after the fact with someone else. If they were both nominated, then that makes sense. But now to say you're going to share the Nobel Prize, you know, it's out of character in my opinion, and very difficult to fathom, let alone promote. So I think Trump is still upset not getting the Nobel Prize, but I hope that that doesn't stop him in recognizing the fact that Maria Corina Machado and Edmundo Gonzalez did win the elections, and they're the ones who should be put into the chair of control, or at worst, in the next few months, if they're going to have another another round of elections, you know, let them be the candidates. For us in Guyana, we are like a little mouse sleeping next to an elephant. And we have a lot to worry about because once Venezuela's oil sector gets going, Professor, Guyana might become of lesser importance to U.S. strategic energy security in the region. We don't have 300 plus barrels. We've got about 50 billion barrels. We don't have 300 you know, billion, you know, of barrels of oil. So we are a little country compared to them. We don't have the expertise like Venezuela, and they still maintain a spurious claim on 3/4 of our territory. How is the United States going to deal with this issue? Are they going to tell Corina Machado stop harassing Guyana, or we suddenly become second fiddle? Those are issues that are keeping people up late at night, including myself. And as I've said, if there are unintended consequences, we know we are going to be affected in Guyana by the mass exodus of hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans coming to our country, and we don't have the capacity as a nation or even a UN presence to help us to cope with such a heavy influx of persons all at once. This is what's on the mind of many people, and I thank you for allowing me to reemphasize this. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Mike. Just for our audience members, President Trump already had a meeting with the big oil companies yesterday, and there was a joint press conference in which some of these issues were discussed. So the meeting has already happened. And there is definitely, in an interview with Sean Hannity, a question was asked to Maria Corina Machado whether she'll be willing to share her Nobel Peace Prize with Trump. And she gave a positive answer, and he was asked the same question. He skirted around, but you can see writing on the wall. There's a question by the audience member Titiksha, and it says Trump wants US companies to build the infrastructure in Venezuela. The stocks of private US companies like Chevron have already gone up. How will that impact the global supply chain? Any of the panelists, if you feel like answering, please unmute yourself and you can answer that question. The question is in the chat room from Titiksha. Who will take a stab on this?
I can go, Doctor, just very quickly, because we've been discussing that here in Brazil, exactly the impacts of the oil supply chain that affects the entire world in such a great manner, right? Prices, distribution, logistics. The thing is, and again, very polemic things to say, the oil from Venezuela was in great part, I mean, we're talking about the greatest producer or the greatest reserves in the world, in spite of the fact that it's not the most clean. It's a kind of very complicated oil to be produced, very pollutant, poor in some, you know, compositions. But anyway, great part of this oil was going to somehow we can say Asia or to the east, right? We can talk about Russia, to India. I don't know the figures, but definitely a great part. China, yes, of course. What I believe is that by shifting this route to the US and more Western, most Western prospects or companies or figures, what we're going to see is that in the end of the day, this oil is going to go to the US or to some other Western powers, but it's going to be reshifted to Asia anyway, because it has a balance of offer demand in the oil chain production that it's going to compensate itself. The question that comes is price. In terms of distribution, we believe that everybody will find its own way of getting the oil they need by increasing production in the Middle East, reducing there, increasing there. So the question mark, at least in Brazil, that we are trying to put figures on that are prices. So how is that gonna impact prices themselves? Some people say that the oil price is gonna even reduce in some parts of the world while increasing in others. But I mean, we're talking about an international commodity, so the price is only one. So anyway, again, I think it's a very interesting discussion because we're putting more questions, raising more questions than giving answers. But I can see Ambassador Kapoor has his hand, Doctor. I don't know, I think he has something to complement, and Dr. Indira also.
Dr. Rampersad also raised her hand. I'll give the opportunity to her first. So Dr. Rampersad, if you can unmute yourself, followed by Ambassador Kapoor.
Thank you, Chair. So the oil in Venezuela, while it is thick and it's viscous and it's complex, and Guyana's oil actually is considered much sweeter. It's sweet oil in that it's more refined, it's easier to deal with. Trump actually said that Venezuelan oil is useful, very useful to the United States because it's good for paving roads, asphalt, and all that kind of thing. So they have a use for it, and that is a global use in terms of the asphalt composition of it. Also, some of the oil companies, particularly Exxon, stated that they're not going to rush into Venezuela and start exploring oil because the infrastructure is in a mess. And for any oil company, major oil company, to go in there to do this work, it's going to take a lot. It's going to cost a lot. And they are going to weigh, of course, they are profit-sharing companies. They're going to weigh the costs, the pros and the cons. They're going to do a cost-benefit analysis to determine whether they want to even go in there to explore oil. I wouldn't be too concerned right now about, diversion from Guyana to Venezuela. Because of that, because of the quality of oil, because there are also other minerals in Guyana that they're interested in, a lot of other minerals in the Essequibo region. I think that the whole situation in Venezuela is so unstable that no company is going to be comfortable going in there right now. So I think Guyana will reign for a while in this part of the world as an oil giant. Yes, we know there's no comparison in terms of the reserves and the amount that can be produced. But I don't think at present Guyana has anything to worry about. Besides, Exxon has contractual obligations with the government of Guyana, which they cannot renege on just like that. International law. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rampersad. Now, Ambassador Kapoor, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adityanjee. All this brings to my mind a very interesting, period of history. When I was ambassador in Chile, a few years before that, the CIA had engineered a coup in Chile. The president at that time, Allende, was
Salvador Allende.
Salvatore Allende was killed in that assault. And the reason for that, which came out later, was that the copper mines in Chile holds the maximum reserves of copper in the world. It is number one in copper, just like Venezuela is number one in oil reserves in the world. And the Chilean government under Salvatore Allende had nationalized the copper mines and the copper mining companies which were working in Chile, because all the profits from the copper were being taken away by the other countries, including the USA, some by Australia, some by Canada. But these were the three main, most important players in that economy at that time. So after the coup, after he was killed, Pinochet, General Pinochet, became the president. He was supported by the CIA. And the Americans went to him and said that now please denationalize the copper mining companies. So Pinochet's response was very amazing and amusing in terms of what's happening now in Venezuela. He said, no, I'm not going to denationalize it. So there was a lot of arguments, a lot of sort of heated arguments. But they said, we brought you to power with this assumption that you will cooperate with us. He said, no, looking at all the records and the files, I see that Chile has all the reserves, but Chile is not getting any benefit out of all your work here, all the operations, all these mining companies are carrying out. So he said that what I can propose is that I will give more licenses for setting up new companies, for starting new mining companies, for starting new mining operations. And there we will frame out some rules where Chile has its rightful share of profits from those resources of copper and other. And they are also very rich in lithium. They are also very rich in other minerals. So he said that I don't mind opening up the mining resources for other countries, mining companies to come in and do that. But this time we will go as per strict rules and some format, and a tremendous amount of benefits will have to flow into Chile. So that is what the American companies and the American administration had to reluctantly agree to. And that is what happened. So lots more companies came in, and Chile continued becoming bigger and bigger in terms of its mining prowess. But it also started becoming richer and richer to the extent that it became the richest country in the whole of Latin America and became an OECD member also. So it had that capacity to negotiate at that time. But with what will happen, what will be the course of the discussion now between Celia Rodriguez or Machado and Trump, etc., has to be seen. Whether they have the capacity to sort of look at the Chilean case and use it as a case study for the benefit, or what else will happen, I do not know. But I thought I'd just bring it up for the consideration of the other panelists and the audience, that there was a precedent where something different happened from what was envisaged during the initial action.
Thank you, Ambassador Kapoor, and thank you, Dr. Rampersad, for your rejoinder to the original question. As moderator, I have the prerogative to, correct some things. There was some comparison made with Manuel Noriega's arrest. The difference is that Manuel Noriega was not the head of the state. He was a chief of the armed forces of Panama when he was arrested under George Herbert Walker Bush administration, I think in 1991. So that analogy is not exactly the same. Here, the head of the state was kidnapped or arrested or whatever, whether he was legitimate or not legitimate, but indeed, he was the de facto head of state. So that's the difference with Manuel Noriega issue. Second thing was mentioned about, Trump wanting to exclude Russia and China from Venezuela and all that sort of thing. In yesterday's press conference with the big oil companies, although he says that he does not want Russia and China to be in Venezuela, he was very open that he would be willing to sell Venezuelan oil to China, of course, for profit. So the issue is not the territorial interference. Issue is the ownership of the oil and profiteering from the oil. So He will allow China to buy Venezuelan oil or crude, of course, with profit sharing by United States and a little bit with Venezuela. So it's a more complex, more nuanced situation. There is a question by Dr. Rama Harita Pusarla. Does Venezuela even have any leverage in the present circumstances? Who wants to answer that from our esteemed panelists? Ambassador Gustavo?
Dr. Aditya, I'll be happy to answer.
Okay.
Thank you. Currently, for all intensive purposes, Venezuela is de facto a nation under occupation, whether we want to accept it or not. It's now under the suzerainty of the United States of America. The US is calling the shots, controlling its airspace, its coast, and the United States is going to set the agenda. This is about resource control, and this is about the United States doing whatever is necessary to kick the Chinese out of Latin America. I'll tell you about Guyana. We have many Chinese mining companies. They're not only taking out our gold and giving us pittance because of very crooked and corrupt agreements between the Guyanese state and the Chinese mining companies. The Chinese mining companies are also shipping out huge amounts of rare earth minerals without informing the people of Guyana. I think the government is aware, but the government of Guyana, in terms of protecting the strategic natural resources of Guyana, they're a toothless poodle. The Chinese companies have been awarding massive contracts in Guyana for building bridges, roads, you name it, cost overruns. All of these deals are so crooked, the Leaning Tower of Pisa will have to take a break. US occupation, suzerainty, control, whatever you want to call it, of Venezuela is going to be good for Guyana because it will put pressure upon the drug traffickers, the gold smugglers, and all the bandidos you have operating freely across the border, the push and pull effect, in conjunction with the Guyanese counterparts, to wake up and realize it's no more free sailing. There's a new sheriff in town, and his name is Donald J. Trump. So whatever traffic you would have had crossing the border, landing in the jungles of Guyana, ferrying drugs, ferrying illicit gold, which then gets smuggled out of Guyana, mixed in with Guyanese legitimate gold, and then sold in the world bullion market. That is going to come to a halting stop because the United States now will be able to have full control over the airspace also of Guyana. So US presence is necessary. I will say the occupation is a necessary evil because in the long term, it's going to wake up Guyana and force the state to either improve, toe the line, you either shape up or ship out. So
Thank you, Mike, for
in
your
the next,
comments. We are running out of time. I would like to
that's
give a
just,
chance to Ambassador
thank you.
Gustavo for some comments. Ambassador Gustavo, you had
Thank you,
raised your
sir.
hand.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Mike, and everyone for this space. I think the question was about the leverage of Venezuela. And of course, it's very interesting to hear from Mike the perspective of Guyana. Super interesting, Mike, actually. Congratulations. But what I believe is that Venezuela has absolutely no leverage at all. I mean, we're talking about a complete domination of the US and the imposition of power in a way that we haven't seen recently. I think, I don't know if it was Mike or Mark Kirton said that in his lifetime, they didn't see such a an aggressive offense in their lifespan. So we're kind of into the same situation. But I raised my hand just to say one thing, and we've been also discussing. So who can do something about it? Is there anyone that has conditions to do something about it? And the answer is yes, the population of the US. So the population of the US are the only people right now that have conditions to change the game in a pacific and solid and democratic way. So what we're trying to do in Brazil is to advocate. Advocate is a fancy word of saying lobbying, right? Within the US, to talk to different authorities and try to convince the local population that indeed that we really have to start changing things internally in the US, because I don't see any perspective from outside at this moment to change things in the short term. We're talking about a very unstable leader with very crazy ambitions. We need the population of the US to join us on board to stabilize and to change things.
Thank you, Ambassador Gustavo. Dr. Rampersad, do you want to make any last comment on this issue?
Okay, so sorry. I will share my opinion finally, that I think that they should have fresh elections towards democratic transition in Venezuela. This is my stated belief. If the last election was in contention with Maduro at the helm in 2024, and we hear that Maria Corina got 70%, but that wasn't contestation. That was contested. I think the proper thing to do now is to call an election. It will take a few months to organize an election, but there would be, time, a grace period legally. But I think it is the way to go, and let the chips fall where they may. So if it's Delcy Rodriguez and she was legitimately elected by the people of Venezuela, so be it. If it is Marina Corina, if it's some other party that participates in plural democracies, this is what should happen. We have moved towards democracy after decades of dictatorship in Latin America. We see the dictatorship, returning. I think we need to have free and fair elections with ample election observers, and the results have to be respected. So that is my call. Let there be free and fair elections in Venezuela in the not too long run. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed to all our distinguished panelists, Mr. Mike Singh, who is currently in New Delhi, Dr. Indira Rampersad from University of West Indies, Mr. Ambassador Gustavo Westmann from Brazil, and Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, who is based in Washington, D.C. It was a very enlightening discussion. The circumstances are not so happy. There is a breach of international law, rule-based order, and we are at a juncture that it has serious consequences for the future in the world. Indeed, as was stated, that there may be beginning of the Third World War if some kinetic action happens. Let's hope that does not happen. My heartfelt thanks to our audience members, and thanks a lot to Team CSA, Mr. Ripudaman Pachori and Mr. Rajiv Verma, who work behind the scenes to make these kind of discussions possible. Thank you very much indeed. We enjoyed the discussion, and hopefully some sane solution will come out from this panel discussion.
Thank you very much for having us.
Okay, bye-bye. We'll be closing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.